Welcome back. Let's show you the very first way that we had modules in JavaScript, or used the concept of modules in JavaScript. It was called the module pattern. And I'm going to just comment this code out for now, so we can talk about the module pattern a bit. As we've discussed, modules give us a better way to organize these variables and functions, so that we can group these variables and functions that make sense together. In terms of organizing things in JavaScript, we had the idea of the global scope, and then we had the idea of the function scope. And that's what we had in JavaScript. Now we also have a concept of block scope, which we've discussed, that we get with let and const. But before that, we just had these two different scopes. But ideally, in an ideal world, we have another scope, which is the module scope, that is actually a little bit higher up than the function scope, so that we can combine multiple functions together under this module scope, but still not pollute our global namespace. And this module scope can be used to share these variables between different functions as well, so that we can share things without having to go through the global scope. In this way, with a module scope, we can be explicit which of the variables, classes, or functions in the module should be available. We can say, hey, this module, module 1, I want you to export this and this function. And then inside of another module, we can say, hey, this module, I want you to import this and this function from this other module. That's us being explicit, saying directly, hey, this is what I want, this is what I'm importing, this is what I'm exporting. And we were able to create this module scope, this module pattern, with something called the module pattern. You see, programmers in JavaScript land, because we didn't really have classes, got clever, and we decided to use closure and encapsulation to create our own module scope. And this is what it looked like. Function, expression, because it is in brackets, and then executing it. We've seen this before, right? It's an immediately invoked function expression, or an iffy. Because we are wrapping it in a bracket, it's not a function declaration, because the first thing that the compiler sees won't be function. And then we're immediately invoking it, calling the function like this. So we're using the idea that we have function scope to simply just write all our code in here that will be private to this function. But we also have the ability to access global variables here. So I can still access the window object or any variable outside of it. And this is essentially a function as a module, because if we wrap the entire file, let's say in our case, our Harry Potter example, if I just put the entire piece of code here, now we've removed everything from the global scope. This file still gets run. For example, if I do fight here, Harry and Voldemort, and let's just console log this. If I save and refresh here, look at that. We are able to run this function over and over, and I'm refreshing, and every once in a while, Harry Potter wins as well. There you go. But I don't have access to fight anymore. Or we have access to fight over here, but if we comment this out and save and refresh, fight is not defined. What about Harry? Harry is not defined either. We've removed global namespaces. But what if we wanted other scripts to use this fight function, but we don't really want them to touch Harry or Voldemort because, they're private variables? Using an iffy and the module pattern, I can simply say variable fight module equals this entire thing. So this, which we call the module pattern, allows us to assign to this variable whatever the return of this function is that gets immediately invoked. So we run this function, and then something gets returned to fight module. So I can simply say in here, return, and whatever we want to make available. In our case, we want to return an object that contains fight. And we don't want to return Harry and Voldemort because those are private variables. So let's have a look if this works. If I refresh here and I do fight, look at that. Under my fight module, I have the object fight. Now keep in mind, if I do just fight here on the window object, nope, that's an error. It's not a global variable. But under our fight module that we've created, I can call fight and do different things like Ron versus, let's say, Hagrid. And if I run this, look at that, Hagrid wins. And other pieces of code can now use this functionality, but only what I tell it to. Essentially, what we're doing is saying, hey, this is our public API. This is our interface. We're only exporting this, but everything else that I'm not exporting, you can't touch. How cool is that? And this pattern of returning what we need is actually called the revealing module pattern. We just reveal whatever we need. So we can have private functions if we want. So private functions that we don't export. We can have those if we wanted to. We can have private variables, and we just specifically say what we want to give up to the public. And as we know, because of closure, even though this function gets executed, because we're returning a function inside of a function, this fight function, for example, if we call it, we'll still have access to Harry and Voldemort if we really wanted to. Now, the other benefit of this was used by libraries like jQuery. For example, when people used to use jQuery a lot on their websites, and I have the script here to grab our jQuery file from a CDN. Let's copy that and add it to the top over here. Now, this allows us to have a jQuery global import. If I save this, let me save this as well. If I go back to index.html and refresh and do jQuery, look at that. We have access to jQuery now because we've added it. And underneath the hood, this is what jQuery is doing. It's saying, hey, I'm going to define a jQuery variable that I'll return. And this jQuery variable, well, it's going to have access to different things. Not everything in our library, but some things that you might need. So for example, if I use another script tag here, and inside of this script tag, we won't need to create a new file. We'll just write it over here. We can say variable script2 is going to equal, well, we can create our own module pattern saying function. And inside of here, we can actually use jQuery using the $, which we get access to. So if I do $, and then select the h1 tag, which we have over here, the hello, and then do click, and then inside of here we have a callback function that will just select the h1, and it will just hide it. So that if I save this and refresh, and I click here, look at that, it disappears my h1. And the beauty of this pattern is that whatever I define in here, well, it won't get touched. For example, if I bring back another script, and this time around we have a global secret and variable fight. Well, this global secret, if I wanted to, I have access to it in here. So let's have global secret, and I'm going to make it equal to 0. If I save this and refresh, if I do global secret, it's now 0. That's not good, right? We just modified another global variable. So how can we solve this? Well, what if here we import our global secret, which is available in our global scope right over here. We call the function with global secret, and we pass it in as a parameter, and we can name it whatever we want. We can say global secret, or we can just say GS for short. So that if we use GS now, and I save here, the global secret remains the same, but if I do GS, well, we don't have access to it because it's inside of our module. Just to clarify this point, if I do global secret here, so it's the same thing and it's the same name, if I change this to global secret just like it was before, and I refresh, global secret is still 1, 2, 3, 4, because when it comes to JavaScript, and we say, hey, I want global secret to be 0, the JavaScript engine is going to look and say, hey, local scope, do you have global secret? And it's going to say, yep, I have global secret. It's in my parameter as part of our variable environment. So I'm going to modify that. So it's not going to go up the scope chain to the global variable to change that. I hope you see the power in that. Because this way, I can start adding to inside of my modules things like jQuery. And now jQuery in here, I can define it whatever I want, such as the $sign. This will still work, but if for some mistake I modify the $sign within this code to equal to null or undefined, well, the $sign or jQuery is still there. The $sign, it's still there because we're not modifying anything outside of ourselves. So using the module pattern, we're able to make something available to the outside world using a public API like this by returning it and attaching it to a variable. We're exporting things. And other modules can explicitly say, hey, I want to use this global variable and be explicit about what they're using so that it makes our code more clear as to what we need from the global variable. Now, let's take a break here and in the next video talk about some of the benefits with the module pattern.